All right, guys. Well, I'm going to try to make this not a long video, but I'm afraid it's not going to happen. I think it's going to end up being a long video, but we'll see how I can do. I'm going to kind of buzz through this pretty quick. And what I'm doing is I'm Wayne's Garage in Australia. Go check out his channel. He has a channel where he was doing a hammer video because Glenn Ridd from NZ Mopar in Australia just did a hammer video. So now I'm tagging both them and showing them, you know, what they're talking about is their favorite hammers and their favorite dollies and their metalworking tools that they like to use, their most favorite or whatever. And go check out Wayne's Garage, and that's on YouTube, and he's in Australia, like I was saying. Give the guy some subs. He doesn't have very many subs, and neither does Glenn Ridd, NZ Mopar. That's our other channel. So go check our other channel out. That's NZ Mopar in Australia on YouTube. They have the hammer videos also, and they do a lot of metalworking and stuff like that, but I think you guys will enjoy both their channels. Also, there's a young kid in Canada, and that's Justin at Eastern Metalworks. Go check his channel out. He's got a great channel also. And he's up and coming, and he's starting to do a lot more metal fab and stuff like that, and it's really good to watch his videos like that, so go check him out. Anyways, I'm going to try to do this quickly, and I want to show you my favorite body hammers and dollies, post dollies, slappers and spoons and all that good stuff. And here we go. So I got this one a while back. This is a Hazette, and old Hazette hammer, I believe is what it is. And all these different hammers have different shapes. Like Paco made this one for me, and at first it had a real sharp deal here, and I dolled that out because I use it all the time now, and I found some cool uses for this one. I use it more like a dolly, where I'll use it to back stuff up, and because I find it a little bit heavy for a hammer, but it works great. And you can see I beat it up real bad, but it works really nice for you know, like on the back side of a fender, and you want to use it as a dolly. Well, you can use the handle to get it up in there, and then I also use that on the back side of the fender, and I'll use that as a reverse pick. Little things like this I find for 50 cents or $1 at a garage sale, and I buy them up. And then what I do is I rehang the handles, and I get them set up the way I like them, and I sharpen the ends or I dull the ends. Like this one I have sharp, and this one's dull, and I use that for kind of a small light picking hammer or bumping hammer. This one also, I picked this up for like $1 or I think it was 50 cents, I don't remember. And I like this end here, and that's a nice little end, you know, nice and sharp where you can get in the sharp corners and whatever, and it's got a long handle on it. Nice little hammer. This is an old welding hammer, and a good buddy of mine gave this to me, Wally. Thanks, Wally. And this hammer here, I use it for this end. It's a welding hammer, but I use it for a body hammer, and it's got the pick on one side, and it's got this this flat spot on the other side. It's a Peen style cross peen. This is one of my very first body hammers I've ever owned, along with this one here. And I worked construction at the time when I had a hot rod shop in California, and I had some old rebar, and I welded this together on a job site. And this is a concrete pin that they use to build bridges, and this is what holds the concrete together. And a lot of you construction guys will probably recognize that. And this rebar is just ridiculous. And this was rebar used in the bridge also. And I welded this because I was a welder on the job site, so I welded that together. And then I also took a couple other pins and cut them, and made this out of a smaller concrete pin or dowel, and made a body hammer out of it, and it worked good. I used it for a lot of years. It never bothered me, and now I'm kind of spoiled with all these other hammers, you know. I take other hammers like this, and this is a claw hammer, and I cut this end off, and this is a vintage claw hammer, so it's a really old one, but I cut the claw off of this side, and I use it because I like it, because you can get into kind of tight spaces when you're doing, you know, stuff on fenders and hoods and doors and whatever. This is another claw hammer that I cut the end off, and it's a vintage claw hammer, and I smoothed out this end, and then I took an old carriage bolt and I bent it, and I welded it on here, and it works fine. You know, when that's your first hammer or your only hammer, it's better than nothing. I mean, I've seen Glenn Ridd using claw hammers to do body work, and you know what? If that's all you have, then use it. Make do with what you got. You're making it work, you know. Here's another mini claw hammer that I found years and years and years ago, and I welded on an old rivet, and it worked just fine for a lot of years, you know. This was a real cheap set that I bought from Harbor Freight, and it was like, I want to say it was like $15 for a set of 3 hammers and a whole bunch of dollies and whatever. And I cut this side off of it and just used the pick end so that it you know, you can get into tight spaces. I used the hell out of this hammer because of this side here, and then this side here, and you can see I sharpened it up so I can get it to where I wanted it. So it's like a picking style, but it's really small. And then I really like this end. I use this more as a dolly too, and it's got a really weird, crappy handle on it. I got to put a new handle on it. It keeps cracking and breaking, parts falling off of it. I think it's just wore out. I made this last night, goofing off in the shop, and it's just an old ball peen hammer. And what I do is I pick these up by the box loads for like $5 for like 20 or 30 of them at garage sales and stuff, and they'll have a whole bunch of hammers in a box, and I'll buy them all up. And on this one, what I did is I cut this off here, and then I trimmed the top and trimmed the bottom, and I used just this part here to hang the hammer. And that's an old ball peen hammer right there, and it worked great. I mean, that'll be a nice little hammer to put on my collection. If you guys are wondering what the yellow tape is, it's just I do that on all the body hammers so that I know that they go back on the rack. And the rack is right here. And I'm getting ready to build another one because I ran out of space. Imagine that. So here's another body hammer. I took a piece of pipe, bent it, or smashed it in the press, and then I took a piece of metal here that I had in my scrap bin, welded it on this side, and welded a rivet on this side, made a body hammer. You know, like I was saying, use what you got. And this is an old ball peen hammer, and I was doing the top of a 35 Studebaker, and I couldn't get into a spot, and so I made a pick, a reverse pick. You can see the pick here, and that's for like spaces like this when you want to get in there, you know, and you want to hammer backwards this way. Hope I'm explaining that right. This is an old ball peen hammer, and you can see that, and I just welded some 3/8 rod on this side and made almost like a cross peen, and then added a piece on this side. And this was just a hammer that I used for doing a job. And then this is another ball peen hammer, and you can see how I cut it and shaped it. This is actually one of my favorite hammers. I love this one right here. This one works really good. This is another ball peen, or I'm sorry, body hammer that I made. Took a piece of pipe, crushed it, and then this here and this here. These pieces are from a connecting rod in a lawnmower, and then this is a ball bearing, and then this is a slug that I welded on here. That was just a slug that I had pressed out from a job site. This is an old Harbor Freight hammer that I broke, and I put a short handle on it, and then I cut this side off, and I welded kind of a cross peen style pick on the end of it. It's a nice little hammer. I'm actually getting ready to put a new handle on this one too. The handle's screwed up on this. What I do though is anytime I'm in a junkyard or somewhere where I can find shapes of metal or pieces of metal or chunks of iron, I grab them up. I have a lot of stuff that's from machinery, and you would be amazed how nice these pieces of metal work as dollies. And then like this piece, I found this in the shop when we moved in here, and so I just kept it for a dolly. And like this guy here, it's just an old broken piece of iron that I cut off and used another end off of or whatever, but I use it all the time as a dolly, and has a slight radius on it. I don't know if you can see that on camera. It doesn't really look like it, but if I put it up to something straight, you can kind of see it. Has a little bit of a radius, and I really like that shape. It works good. Stuff like this. You know, I don't know what the heck this was. This is something that broke off of a big machine or something. It was in here in the building, and I actually use that a lot too. And this piece here, I cut a slot in it, and I use that for sticking over sheet metal and then bending over the sheet metal. And you can see the slot that I cut in it. It works really good. That's an awesome tool right there. Dollies like this, I'll cut ends on them so you can get up underneath fender lips. And this one here I use for doing the wire edge on fenders. And this is really nice. You know, use what you got. And then this is just stuff that people have given me over the years. My little mini ball peen hammers and stuff. Tiniest ball peen hammer I have. And then Adam from Dirt and Rust gave me that one. That one's badass. And then, you know, I have my typical Martin dollies like this. Really nice ones I will only use on certain jobs. This one here is one of my favorites. I like the shapes of it. You know, these are all store-bought dollies, and then I end up customizing them. This is another slug that is just from something like off a piece of machinery or whatever. And then I have my body files. I got a whole bunch of those here, and I have the files up top, and I also have a whole bunch of them here, old body files that I bought at garage sales for like 50 cents or $1. And I take old chisels and I put them on the belt sander and I smooth them, and then that way you can use those for shaping stuff. They work really handy. I have other stuff like this, and I use this for making dimple dies, or as a dimple die. There's just, you know, any shape you can find. As far as dollies and whatever, they work awesome. Like this here is an old piece off of some machine, and I just smoothed it out. And I mean, look at that, that's a dolly. It's perfect, it works awesome. I've used it for years. And you know, I have big hammers like this, body hammers. And then I have other hammers that I've made, like this hammer here. From here over, I welded this piece on here, and I use the hell out of that hammer. And I have other hammers that I've made up here. Like this one was made out of an axe. You can watch that video. It's an old wall board. It's a sheetrock hammer, and it had an axe on this side. And I cut it down, made it into a body hammer, and it's actually one of my favorites. And here's another ball peen hammer, and I shaped that one. Made that into a cross peen style. Wooden mallets that I've made. I have other hammers here, you know, that I've bought at garage sales for like $1 or 50 cents, whatever. Put a handle on them. Use the hell out of them. All these hammers here, these are all store-bought, like Snap-on and different brands and whatever. And then this one here I made. This is one of my favorite hammers. That's why it's hung on the side like that. And this was an old knurled piece off of a lathe that I found. It was sitting underneath a lathe, and then this was an old welding hammer, and I welded those together and made a body hammer out of it. This one here, I made, there's a video on this. I did a cobbler's hammer, and I cut the end off the cobbler's hammer and made this into a nice little body hammer. And man, this thing is sweet. It's super lightweight, and I like how tiny the head is, and you can just get into some super tight places when you're hammering. What else we got here? This one here, this is an old ball peen hammer, and you can see what I did. I turned it into a body hammer just by welding a piece of 3/16 inch steel on the end of it, and it works great. I mean, I've used that for years. You know, you can see how beat up it is. This one here was just this was a ball joint on I think it was on a tractor. It was a ball joint, and I sharpened it down on this side, made a pick, and then it's got the ball on this side, and it's just a piece of chrome motorcycle handlebars that I welded together. And actually it was too short when I welded it together, so I actually cut another piece of the handlebar off and put it on here and welded it right here. And I left the weld because it kind of gives you a little bit of grip for your fingers when you're holding this hammer, and it works amazing. I use it all the time. You know, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on hammers and dollies and equipment to have nice metalworking tools. You can use what you got. This Harbor Freight anvil has been just amazing. I have better anvils. I have nicer anvils and older anvils with better steel, but this one's perfect for using for metal shaping. I got it for $50 at Harbor Freight, and I think with the, you know, with the price of anvils going up, I don't know if these are any more at Harbor Freight now, but I'm sure they're still around $50 at Harbor Freight. But you know, for metalworking, the stuff that I do, it's perfect. I took an old log and I made a metal shrinking stump, and all I did was cut 2 divots in it, cut this shape out, cut this out, and I did all this with a chainsaw. You can watch one of the back videos that I have, and it works amazing. And this is a hammer that I made out of I carved this by hand with just a Mora knife, and then drilled a hole through it, put a piece of all thread, welded a handle on it, and this is my tuck shrinking setup here, and this works really, really well. And then over here, this is priceless. If you're gonna be doing metalworking and sheet metal shaping, you have to have one of these. I mean, this is like, and you know, my first one never was, you know, this is a store-bought Eastwood brand beater bag. And this beater bag I bought from Eastwood. But my first one was one that was made out of an old leather jacket with sand poured inside of it and sewed up, and it worked awesome. Used it for years. You know, you don't have to go and buy an expensive beater bag or nothing like that. You can actually make one if you have the material sitting around and you have the talent to do this stuff. This is just a Harbor Freight hammer that they carry. This was $8 at Harbor Freight. I hated the round handle, so I stuck this in my saw and shaped the handle. Now it doesn't turn in your hand when you're using it. Now you can use it all the time, and it's you know, it stays straight up and down in your hand, that's really important. These are dapping and caulking tools right here, from here over, and I almost all these I made. These are poly, like this right here. There's another name for it, I can't think of it right now. It's a Delrin. Delrin plastic is what this is. That's just a name brand. A buddy of mine cut these out for me on his bandsaw, and these are used for shaping, and you hammer into different shapes, you know, on edges and whatever, and it gives you a nice crisp edge when you're doing sheet metal work. Same thing here. I took an old chisel, and this is a concrete chisel, and I instead of sharpening it, I dulled it, and I got the shape to where I wanted it. Focus. There you go. And then this is a caulking or dapping tool also. And this is just for getting shapes in metal. And you know, you beat on these with a hammer, and you can see they're kind of teardrop shaped. This one I haven't used that much. I thought I would, but I guess not. But this smaller one, I use the heck out of it. This one is really nice. And this is for, like wire edging a fender. And you could stick that on there like this and hammer on it, and it curves that edge over and runs the wire up underneath there. This is a really nice one if you can find one of these. If not, I mean, that's a simple tool to make. Slapper hammers or body spoons, whatever you want to call them. This is a Harbor Freight one here. I think it was like $20 on a set with a hammer and a dolly and whatever. It's been really good to me. And I love this one. This one's really nice. This is a Martin. It's super lightweight, but it actually ends up being too light sometimes. So it doesn't work too good, you know, if you have some heavy sheet metal that you have to bang on. And I made this one. I sent one of these to Ruti Customs a while back, and this one is one of my favorite slappers right here. It ends up moving metal really quick, and I made this out of a car leaf spring. And this one was just, I made this years ago out of a piece of round rod, and I think it was like 3/4 inch round rod. I can't remember, but I made this. And no, this one, I'm sorry, I didn't make this one. This one was out of an old tire tool, and I ended up flattening the edge. So this one I did make, and this is just flat stock, and it's hardened, and it works really good as a slapper for shaping metal, knocking dents out. And then obviously this one I made also, and I've had this one since I was a kid. This one, it works really good too. Some of the other things that you need when you're doing metalworking is a really good vise. And something I cannot stand is I see these people dinking around with a vise, and the whole table's moving around, and this thing will not move. This table does not budge. When you're hammering on this thing, that is not moving. This table won't move. It's like 1/2 inch steel, and then this is super thick angle iron. I mean, that's a really nice setup right there for shaping metal. These are all post dollies, and this is an old auto body dolly that I welded to a piece. And what I do is I put these in the vise, and then you can lift them up, tighten the vise, and do all your shaping. This one here is on Ford trucks, Ford pickups, 150s and bigger. This is how you can make that shape. See how this is rotted out on the Chevys? Well, on the Ford trucks, when that's rotted out, that shape right there is for building that panel by hand. And all I use is a hammer and dolly. I don't use any special tools. And this guy right here, and that's it. Each one of these dollies I've made, like for bending metal. And this is kind of almost like a tuck shrinker. You could stick the piece of sheet metal in there and twist it. But you know, you don't have to have tons of money. You could take old hammers and whatever and pieces of iron and make them and whatever. I'm not going to keep rambling on though. You get the drift. you can kind of see some of my hammers that I have. And this is just a couple of them. I'm actually building some more racks real soon. And as soon as I get those racks done, I'll kind of go through my whole hammer collection and show you guys some of the hammers that I have. But anyways, thanks a lot for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I appreciate the support. Go check those guys' channels out. Later.